Back with another video. It's Aidan from Bespoke Coachworks here, and this time we'll be covering the second part of the quarter panel twist. So following on from the last video, we're just refining in the radius, the tapered radius along the edge where we've done a lot of linear stretching. So I'm just creating more volume on the sandbag inbound from the edge, because if you put too much attention to the edge, you run the risk of it splitting. So I'm just hammering inbound at the moment to create that extra material, and then when you move over to the power hammer with your linear stretch dies, it will release the edge quite quickly, and then all that material that you've then built up, you've stretched inbound, will then release, and it will really fan the panel out. So that's what I was focusing on in that area. So in this video, we're going to have a little bit of refinement of that edge, bit of shrinking on the power hammer, pulling the top edge over, and then we'll be doing a lot of wheeling. You see a lot of different anvils, things like that on the English wheel, different sort of methods. So a bit to go over. So at the moment, just refining sort of the edge right next to where you've hammered in the radius. So just creating a little bit more. Just sort of blending that, I guess, the transition between the tighter radius section and the flatter section that you saw wheel in the last video. So here now just refining a little bit more with the linear stretch dies. In the last video, there was an area where I said that I was having issues because the paper wasn't fully showing if it was stretch or if it was shrink. This is the point when I've realized where it was shrink. So in the last video, I didn't spend a lot of time focusing on the stretch aspect of it because I just wasn't sure. But the beautiful thing about metal is, because I did do a little bit of stretching there, is I did do a little bit of stretching in that area, but because I wasn't sure, you're able to go back and just reverse it. So the beautiful thing about metal is if you stretch it too much, you can just go back and shrink it, and if you over shrink, you just stretch it back out. So yeah, it caught me off guard a little bit, not knowing. So here we're trying to sort of lean that top section of the material over. It's got quite, because this is the twisted, this is the section where the material really starts to twist. So just sort of using my body weight, like hooking it into my belly and then sort of hammering to sort of widen the radius open and sort of twist that material around, and then it will also take more shrinking to help with that. There was an area, because it was done on the wire, I used TIG wire and stuff to build the wire form. The transition I didn't completely get right. Something that you can do with wire and empty space, it doesn't translate exactly the same as what a piece of material does. Like there's only so far you can twist a piece of solid material. So yeah, so this is the section here where I'm shrinking it to lean that material over, and it is changing a little bit from my wire form. But I guess the beautiful thing though that the wire form did do is it gave me the shape that I was aiming towards, and then obviously when the reality come, it was a little bit different. So yeah, still very vital that I'd done that wire form in the beginning, so it gave me somewhere to aim for with the material, and it gave me the amount of material that I needed. So none of that changed. It was just caught me off guard a little bit in the in whereas I needed to shrink, not stretch. So just pulling that final bit in there, it's starting to get very close to the right shape now. So moving over to the car, got a couple of clamps in, and then just sort of refining. I've got a leather shop bag in my left hand that I'm putting on the back side, and then just with the plastic mallet on the top side, just refining that shape in so you can sort of see the two panels blend together. And this is where you can sort of see, when I say quarter panel twist, you can see where that panel there has, as it goes through from its vertical section, it twists over into the rear section. And it's quite an extreme transition. I've never done a transition quite like that on a car before, so pretty exciting to sort of try it out and to sort of see how far you can, I guess, take the material. There's still quite a lot of pressure on it at the moment, so a lot of refining needs to be done. But yeah, you can kind of really see that, that twisted section. So a couple of small little adjustments on the hammer, still trying to correct the form. A little bit of shrinking that still needs to be done. So in here I've got the thumbnail shrinking dies. In an upcoming video that I've already recorded, I will speak a little bit about thumbnail shrinking dies, and yeah, give a little bit more of an explanation on those dies and how to sort of use them while you're marking out your panel and things like that. So just a couple of little tune-ups on the edge here, a little bit of overstretching. And now we're moving on to the English wheel. So once again, always with the flattest possible radius in your lower anvil that will suit your panel. So this would be like a 36-inch radius that I have in at the moment. And you can see that I'm cross-wheeling. I always cross-wheel in the beginning over the top of shrink lines in particular, but pretty much always, because it's a great way to blend surface together. Especially on a radius, it's really good to go across the panel because it sort of blends all the areas together. If you think about when you're wheeling with the radius, you've got quite a small contact area hitting the metal. Where if you have the panel slightly twisted on the lower anvil, you will actually have more area contacting, and so you're sort of picking up a little bit of, like, let's say the top of the like if you've got a radius, you sort of will be picking up different areas of the radius. So you'll sort of have like the top section of it, the center, and then you'll have the lower part as you cross through. Yeah, you like sort of on diagonals, you're kind of picking up more of the radius. So it's quite interesting to see how much of a difference wheeling on in a like sort of crosshatch pattern makes. So now I'm wheeling out the tapered radius, and once again you can see it's on an angle. So if I was to go, because this is a reverse curve and I've got a flat upper anvil, if I was to be wheeling with the radius, the edge of my top anvil would be cutting into the reverse curve. So you wheel on an angle, and you've got to find the right angle, otherwise it will still dig in, or you'll dig in with your lower anvil. But if you turn the panel slightly to the side, you can wheel a reverse curve section with a flat upper anvil. So just something to think about next time you are playing around with the English wheel and you're trying to wheel something, and you don't cross wheel. Just give it a try, and I'd love to hear your feedback on what that has done. So yeah, wheeling crossways through it at the moment, just trying to get that initial smoothing done. It gets to the point where it starts to tighten up, and then I've got to start exploring through my range of English wheels. In the first video that I put up, I've done a little bit of a shop tour. I think it was in the Designing the Rolls-Royce boat tail video. I've done a bit of a shop tour, and you'll see that I have a range of English wheels, and this is the reason why. So this machine that I'm on at the moment has a 2-inch wide upper anvil. So the contact area on the upper anvil is a lot narrower than obviously on the 3-inch. So this allows me to get through the radius easier without having problems with your upper anvil hitting on the machine. Also too, with this machine, the upper anvil has the upper anvil has more of a, I guess, a lead-in edge and lead-out edge on the very edge of the top anvil. So once again, that just helps with marking in particular. For reverse curve panels, I relieved the edge of it because I've got multiple wheels. I've got two of my machines are a little bit sharper, and this one in particular is got a lot more radius on the side. So yeah, and you can see this shot here really shows that taper in radius. It's quite tight in the bottom, and it really fans out. So yeah, and you can sort of see when I lift the panel up into the air as well, that twist that the material has in it, how much it's leant over. So yeah, changing through the different couple of different anvils, trying to make sure you're always getting the most amount of contact on a particular side. Back over to the big wheel again, and then this time I'm trying to wheel that big the upper face, but then I'm also trying to blend the section between the tighter sort of radius and the flatter, I guess the upper section, I guess you would say. So you can see I'm sort of rolling in and then letting the panel slightly roll around the upper anvil. You got to be mindful, particularly doing something like that you have got the right size anvil in the lower, because as you blend up and through the wheel, you don't want to crush you don't want to have it too flat of a radius on the bottom, because you can crush. You'll be crushing your panel into the sides of your lower anvil. So now I've switched over to another machine. It's got 3-inch wide. It's got a 3-inch wide upper and lower, but the diameter of the upper wheel is smaller than my other big wheel. So the reason for that is this upper anvil is able to actually roll into that radius a little bit easier than what the big machine was. So the big machine was good for the very top bit, but because it's tapered, I need this smaller machine to be able to roll up into that. So yeah, quite complex, but that's the beautiful thing about having all the different machines. I was able to, play around and go through all all of it. So you can see here that twist in the material and how much work. So got a little bit extra work to do here. So I've got ST written for stretching, so I need to do a little bit of stretching here in those sections. And then these little areas, I've got a little B, and that's just telling me to block that area down. SH will indicate shrink. And what I'm reading there is just that the highlight lines are a little bit wavy where I've said to block. Shrinking will just pull it down a little bit because it's stretched too much, so it's flaring up away from so you can see it's lifted just there between the two panels, so I needed to stretch that down a little bit, and then shrinking along the edge to pull it back down closer to the wire form. So yeah, you'll often see on my material when I go to do trial fits that I'll have SH, ST, B, and that indicates shrinking, stretching, blocking. Sometimes you'll have arrows and things like that, just to give yourself pointers. So far, just briefly reading the highlight lines from the reflection of the sweeps on the back wall. The panel's getting quite close, and also the reflection of myself in the panel. but this is where we're in the final sort of tune-up stage. As I was saying before, I'm quite lucky to have multiple English wheels, and there's the reason why I've got multiples, because you can really jump between the three and use them for their best purpose. So you can see there where I'm rolling up and through with the top section. Then I'll have to jump over to the anvil that has the smaller top radius, and all, once again, it's always in trying to have the most contact on the anvil at once. That allows a nicer surface finish always. This obviously can be done with only having one wheel, but it makes it more difficult. The beautiful thing about having three is that you can have different machines set up for different things, and you can just jump between the three. Obviously, in a workshop, speed is it's quite an essential thing. So, yeah, very lucky to work with the guys at Hare and Forbes. I helped develop these wheels, so really good to be able to work with those guys and bring good quality machines at a really affordable price. You can see there the panel really, you can see the twist that it has in it. It's quite extreme. Sometimes awkward to handle, but I always find the best thing to do is just to always be very light with the touch with your hand, so you're not forcing the material any sort of direction. And the material likes that the most. Once again, I don't use a lot of pressure on my wheels. I kind of would rather do lots of passes to get to my shape, which I always find that it works out to be faster that way, because you're keeping it nice and clean. I don't spend a lot of time, if any, filing and doing all that sort of stuff, trying to touch my panels up. I just get them nice off the machines, move on to the welding process, and then just do a quick finish on the weld area only, which I'll also cover in upcoming videos. So just really focusing on that tapered radius at the moment, trying to get that nice and smooth. It is quite hard to wheel because of the awkwardness of the panel, but yeah, it is definitely doable with only having one wheel, but you'll have to pull the material out of form. One thing that the panel doesn't like, particularly if it's a reverse curve though, is to be pulled. A reverse curve is very hard to pull out of form. So when you hear me as well mention form, so essentially you can do three things with metal. You can shrink it, you can stretch it, and then you can manipulate the form. So the form of the material is the current state. That's the form. So out of form, also an in-form panel is the final form that you are chasing when it's on a vehicle. The way you create a form is through shrinking and stretching, and that gets you to your final form. So, for an example, if you have a guard on a car, or a wing, or a fender that in for the other countries, so if you have that panel and you bend it over your knee, it's no longer in form. The shrink and the stretch has not changed in the panel. All it is that the orientation, the arrangement of the material is not in its final form, so it's out of form. So if you're to, shrink, or you're to stretch, then you are starting to manipulate. You're manipulating the shape, so you're shaping the metal. So that's when you hear words like form, shrink, stretch. That's what I'm talking about. So shaping functions, shrink and stretch. And then doing something to manipulate form is like bending, bending it over your knee, putting in a folder, putting in a slit roller, things like that. So yeah, quite hard to manipulate the form of a reverse curve. They are quite a reverse curve. Just holds its shape very well. Always very difficult to manipulate the form. You'll see in an upcoming video, I do a compound curve, and that is very very easily manipulated in and out of form, and you'll see that on the video. Typically, I'll wheel. I like to do a lot of wheeling and stuff on a compound curve out of form, and that's all in trying to have as much contact area on the anvils as possible. But yeah, I'll cover that in an upcoming video. Just doing final little tweaks on the surface, really light pressure, just trying to, make sure it's all as smooth as possible. You can really see that twist in the panel there. Really interesting shape. So fitting on the car, and now I'm just sort of blending in the two panels together. Got a couple of clamps, got a couple of Clecos on the panels, and just using a reverse curve slapper, just to sort of, and a sandbag in my other hand, just to try and tweak the two panels together. As nice as you get them off the machines, you always need a little bit of tweaking with your hands, and you can see I'm sort of walking around trying to gauge the panel off multiple angles, really trying to read the light and see what the light's doing to the panel. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Like always, please share, subscribe, like, comment, give me your feedback. It all helps. Really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.